обязательно будет в конце возможность задать
At the end, you will have an opportunity to ask your questions. We decided to place it at the end.
такой регламент.
That's our meeting. And minutes of the agenda.
Добрый день.
Distinguished colleagues,
Позвольте
good afternoon.
Артур, я являюсь вице-президентом
My name is Lira Artur. I'm the representative of the Association of Exporters and Importers. Now we gain the experience on internal and external affairs.
коллегам и мне. Спасибо большое.
Could you please do not disturb the colleagues and me?
Естественно,
Accordingly,
и с регионами очень достаточно
as we have a
значительный опыт
strong tie with regions and gained the experience on export and import politics, both in the new directions like
Азии, Африка.
Latin America, Africa,
Вопросом
also on the issues of the specialties connected with the logistics,
наиболее
customs services,
является
and transportation. What questions are the most essential for the participants of the
начать с
exporters? I'd like to start our session with the questions connected with the customs services and new logistics routes, and to give the floor to Irina Valerievna, the coordinator of the current committee on implementation of the taxation politics
коллегой
in the Russian Federation. She is also the vice president of the Association of Exporters and Importers. Elena Valerievna, could you please show us the main directions of development in logistics?
Наталья Васильевна, это
We would also discuss it with Natalia Vasilyevna. Also the question connected with the taxation accreditation. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. I also have a presentation. If it's possible to show it, to put it on.
спасибо.
Thank you.
У нас не так много времени, поговорить очень хочется.
We don't have enough time to talk about all the aspects here from the stage.
В зале обсудить
I believe it would be better to discuss
инструменты,
most of the aspects after the session altogether, all those instruments which are used in exporting, starting with the payments and finishing with logistics.
у нас решений в моменте останется, и нам придется.
When we talk much about it, I think we would
Я сейчас вот пробегу,
find the lack of solutions.
я думаю, не так интересно. Мы с вами понимаем, что
We understand that
картинка нашего экспорта и импорта в отчет
the picture of our export and import has changed. All the figures has changed. All the figures have changed. Undoubtedly, our partner countries' role has already changed too.
статистику не надо
When you look at the figures,
товара
never say
в понимании,
that our turnover in the classic understanding has
потому что
grown several times, because it's not
да, и
natural way, it's just a transit. When we are talking about
мне вообще
the current moment, our friendly countries,
что Россию любят.
I could say
Какой статус
that Russia is beloved, no difference what status we have, and many countries want to have trade with other countries too,
который, как
with Russia too. So those companies who have
это большая часть
suffered
случаев и
some complications is mostly connected with political or private cases.
возможности
Most of suppliers try to find the ways to
пакетом,
sell goods
который там будет
with all that set up
наличие нас
limitations. Of course, the amount of
да, в компании. Оно
foreign
да,
funds
вот новая
of the friendly countries in other countries
определилась.
disturb us a lot. That's the way how our grade 8 numbers have changed. We understand that when we buy goods in
Теми же
China and India, we face the same problems when we buy all that goods in Europe too. Because, for example, in some of the fields, we have the same complications in India. It could be a private case once again, because they have the foreign assets. they cannot ship goods directly, or the problems with
В процессе дискуссии Артур Дмитриевич
bank transfers. I believe that we'll also receive commentaries on this issue a bit later, with all the ways how we build it up right now, how we cooperate with other countries. So all that supply chains
с точки зрения логистики, то
have
есть
changed.
и с точки зрения финансовой логистики.
From the point of view of logistics, financing, communication with our foreign partners,
Поменялось. Главное,
of course, it would take long to talk about it.
у нее совершенно
We should understand that we face the new time.
в товарных группах есть проблемы.
In many trade groups, we have a lot of problems, but
Будем говорить там про газ,
in majority,
там какого-то такого
except
оборудования.
Gazprom or some equipment where we, of course, face complications.
Вещи даже
If it's non-resource
Но можно. Да, это больно покупателю. Да,
purchase, it could be more,
об инструменте
it could be,
они примерно
the price can be higher, for example, the delivery would be longer and so on. But we should
это
estimate it
случай. Да?
within
Мы говорим
the one company, because when we talk about the input of
функционных групп, а вот как
details,
вы будете
equipment, now we see Andrei Yevgenyevich, the president of Moscow Association of Entrepreneurs and Association of Exporters and Importers. That's applause. I think we would be grateful for this.
что цикл
We should understand that the cycle has changed,
да, с
and we need to get used to it. We have the instruments.
негативных факторов,
Under all the negative circumstances,
инструмент,
we gain new instruments.
буду
For
погружен,
example, parallel import.
достаточно болезненно.
I won't dig deeper into it because it's a bit complicated issue from the point of view of
Иначе, даже с теми шероховатостями
many aspects. Even though we have
этого инструмента,
that complications in using this tool,
я вот, ну, всё-таки
it is still profitable.
секторе таможни, да,
As I will talk about customer service,
что многое там все-таки пока в руке,
it also faces some challenges because
внесли,
they have a lot of changes
но тем не менее, да,
in listing, once again out listing,
и вообще, мне кажется,
but everything stays in quite good condition
можно проблем вообще никаких нет, потому что она,
because
она-
first of all it's loyal, the second it is digital.
да, есть постпроверка,
Of course they have
сейчас
several checkups, several monitorings.
я думаю, что все
I
знают,
would tell a bit more about the
такой же
taxation monitoring. In customer service we also have it. For example, if you take part in this monitoring, the coefficient of
и он снижает.
further monitoring and further supervision
Но тоже это
becomes lower.
глобальному, как бы, да,
But it's mostly about our global understanding of the agenda.
до сегодняшней ситуации, это просто,
Even
я просто привожу пример,
before the current moment, we had the same situation, but it remains quite still.
имеем, да, вот этот слайд, как за счет того, что
Here on the slide, you can see what do we have
проблем
concerning the problems and casualties that we face right now.
у нас начинает
But it influences on the growth. For example, we start to produce some of the new goods. Of course, there are some critics. We cannot
оборудование, которое нам нужно,
substitute some
что мы начали заниматься своей
facilities, we cannot substitute some goods. But the fact that we have started to produce our own goods, it's already a positive moment. As for logistics, I think Natalia Vasilievna will touch upon this topic a bit later. As for delivery,
с логистикой
the main problem
делись не из-за СВО,
is that all challenges we faced started even before the pandemics,
который
because we had a crisis, the lack of packaging.
все сломалось. Поэтому
That was the time we faced our first crisis. And after that, we had the increase in prices.
стабильно потоки
Right now, the flows
более-менее по сравнению с тем хаосом, который
are changing their positions and everything
достаточно
flows in its regular way.
маленький слайд о том, как
There is a short slide,
таблетка как раз
what to do, where are the pills, red and blue. When you have rapid changes,
управление
we have only one solution, anti-crisis management.
на наш с вами век не будет.
we would never face the same situation and the same position as it was before. We need to get used to the new reality. We need the personnel, we need specialists and events, including investment Sabantui, because we'll have an opportunity for exchange of the experiences and practices in order to attract the investments or to find new ties and strengthen the previous ones. And the global aspect. That is the slide that I really love. If we had only blue before, right now we have more variants for stabilization of the situation. Concerning, now I'd like to touch upon the customers regulation. We have simplifications in several aspects. First of all, in the monetary politics, the exporters could get the benefits, could get the money in cash. That was prohibited before, because on the export contract, it was banned to receive the payment. You could be fined or you could lose money before. The second, as I mentioned, the monitoring, but it influences only if you are within the structure, you would get another way of the monitoring. And the main slide that I wanted to show is that not only in Russia but also in other countries, there are different agreements, including the customer service. For example, when they have the simplified structure of customers, for example, registration or automatic agreements without inspectors and so on. It gives the opportunity, the faster delivery, the faster issue of the goods. And of course, the price would be lower. Of course, it's not an easy topic, but when two countries come to an agreement, it can be different in many ways. For example, the group of goods, or it could be some payment systems. It depends on what do they agree on. So this is the field where they try to reach the agreement in many ways. And many social organizations try to provide assistance in this industry. For example, firstly connected with fruit and vegetables, because we had simplified customers. Right now, it is acceptable for many types of goods, both on behalf of Russian customers and, for example, Turkey purchases. It influences the expenditures of both countries. As we are short of time, I would like also to sum up about import. We have no global changes from the position of customers' registration. All those 4 items depicted on the slide remain the same. The only complication is our cost by the proof of the costs that you agree on. But I believe that those enterprises and companies who are involved into customer services and they have the representatives, they still conduct their expertise and work in the same way. But from the point of view of customers, we have more simplifications, not complications. Maybe in other countries or with other organizations. For example, when we had a direct contract before, no difference whether it's export or import. Now they have second, third parties there. Previously, customers asked for more documents on different issues. Now they understand this. And of course, they minimize this additional invocations. So all in all, everything is good in the customer service. And if you are an entrepreneur, if you have any cases, if you have any claims for advancement of customer service, limitations, and privacy, we are ready to answer your questions. You can write to our email, and if this case is serious, we could take it to the consideration of our commission. Every year, we made at least 10 amendments in the legislation sphere in customer service. So we could say that everything works. Of course, we cannot take out all the fees, but still we could solve all your cases.
I think that we will leave questions and answers session to the end after presentations of all speakers. And I would like to start with Andrei Evgenievich Bodinok, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, we can say that right now some entrepreneurs see that trade relations are more complicated. Others say that there are new opportunities opened up, and very often it seems that people describe two different realities, two different universities. What do you think? Whether it is becoming simpler, whether it is becoming more complicated? And as an expert, as a consultant of the government of the Russian Federation, as a scientist, as a scholar, how do you see the relations of Russia on the international arena? How do you see the prospects of development of new directions of our trade? Thank you. The question is multifaceted, and I think that, yes, we did have a lot of problems with the pandemic situation, and logistics became in huge demand, and coronavirus was a terrible blow, and now special operation is also a huge blow. And I cannot tell the government of the Russian Federation that they should have behaved in a different way, because we could have organized everything to put everything into a cryptocurrency, and the balance of our country allowed us to do so. We had 6 trillion rubles, which we could have put into the economy of our country, and I was hoping that we will be regulating the interest rate not through the percentage rate of the central bank, and that is a terrible mistake. That's a blunder, colossal blunder, which still takes place and which decreases our competitiveness and decreases our opportunity to replace imports. And we have all the necessary prerequisites to change it. We should change our behavior. We should change regulating the inflation through the changing of the interest rates of the central bank. That's utopia. It led to pumping money out of the economy, and we are not a sovereign element of the international financial situation. We stabilize our economy depending on the dollar, but in reality, after the October Revolution back in 1917, we created such a growth within 10 years, within 1 decade. And if you look at this from the international experience, China regulates everything through taxation rather than interest rates of the central bank. The whole world increases the interest rates of the central bank, but they decrease it, and they use the experience of the Soviet school of economy, and they increase their money flows by 42%. And I hope that our economy will get back to that kind of economy. So the money printed by the United States are put into a bubble, and China puts that money back into the budget of their country. Primakov used to do the same, and they sent Washington packing, and they increased the mass of money, the volume of money, by 40%. And within 8 months, Primakov's government managed that. And the growth, of course, was not only in products, but in the amount of money. And that was the only step conducted by Gerashchenko. Both Primakov and Gerashchenko were responsible for that. They demonstrated when central bank unites with the central government will make us capable of making a huge step forward. And I hope there will be such a breakthrough very soon, because in the absence of that, we won't be able to do that. And once again, I emphasize, we should give loans in rubles to our foreign friends, and the interest rate should be lower. And we should follow the example of Kitai, of China. You can give it to our partners, to our neighboring countries who still have the experience of the Soviet Union. And even if we have money, we do not put them into the economy. But this inflation can be put on the side of our neighboring countries. And if we give loans in rubles, we will make them dependent on us politically as well, just like with China. China gives money out in yuan, and they receive, if the countries cannot pay back. For example, Tajikistan had to give back lands, and that is concerning macroeconomy. But why the situation is different in different industries? Because some industries try harder, but the domestic consumption is not growing, and the transportation corridors should be based on the whole South Asian region, on the Asia-Pacific region. There are huge prospects over there. But our solutions are not thought of properly. And right now we created several institutions within the framework of our organization. And there are banks which had not participated in the foreign economic activity before. Those medium-sized banks, they were not restricted by sanctions, and we created some non-financial institutions which follow our export-import activity, because sanctions, for example, if you work with China, it's more or less okay on the second echelon. But unfortunately, Latin America or Africa, they can be blocked by the Western banks. So unless the exporter is supported by proper banking accounts, exchange of money, and those banks should not be under sanctions. And that is why we create a whole line of opening banking accounts. And if there are bankers here, medium-sized banks, who never expected to participate in the foreign economic activity, now you can do that. And this consortium is being developed. For example, we've been on Mauritius recently, and the central bank only issues decrees and says that those countries are favorable for us, for example, Latin America, Africa, and they do not promote it enough. And in Mauritius, this status was given to them. They can trade in Russia like 10% cheaper. And as it is one of the financial centers, financial and banking center, and the transportation hub as well, and it's second after Hamburg, they managed to create such a huge port. It's the 5th in the world. And there is a lot of foreign economic activity. They can have Indian banks. You can use payment in Indian currency as well. And we have this huge problem of Indian rupees. We've accumulated too many of them, and you can put those money flows onto Mauritius. And unfortunately, our government has not informed anyone properly. It's somehow too secret. And I'm just trying to say that there are new prospects opening up, how to avoid those sanctions. And the banks of the second, third echelon can actually participate in the foreign economic activity, and exporters, importers. Now you can have guaranteed support, financial guarantees for all your bargains. And that is very important in the current volatile situation. So I wish all of us success, and I think that everything is going to be all right. Unfortunately, we cannot change some actions of our authorities. We could have been much more successful on the economic front. We could have been much more aggressive on the economic part. And we created, for example, right now, Chin platform, which works with grain, with oils, and instead of trading on that platform, Sberbank shows its own platform. And VTB made something separate, Sberbank made something separate, and we created a complete universal mechanism which allows you to avoid sanctions through our platform. Americans wanted to buy it, but it is still in the Russian Federation, and we have to involve our residents and non-residents onto our platform. We should make it as much open as possible, but the central bank makes it secret. So we are very much against the actions of the authorities over here. We should be much more aggressive. We should be at the forefront, and we do have quite a lot of prerequisites to change, reshape the world in economic sense. I've been teaching macroeconomics, and I can tell you about the economy in the world, and it is great, it's of great interest, and I can tell you much more about that. But thank you for your attention. Thanks a lot. That was very interesting, and it's understandable that you can speak for days and days on every single point. And sometimes I experience your expert approach. And you mentioned transportation corridors. I would like to invite Mrs. Ivanova. That's the counselor, advisor of the president of the Moscow Association of Entrepreneurs, director of AV Group. Mrs. Ivanova, I was honored to have attended your presentation, and I was impressed by the width and range of transportation corridors. Of course, there are infrastructural problems connected with some of them. So I would like to discuss it with you. What are the most important directions of our work? And I would like to draw your attention to the fact that when she had her presentation, there was a slide about transportation corridors. But in my opinion, that was not enough. there are much more of them. So the question is why business narrows down and tends to use the same routes. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I do not have a presentation today because we wanted to talk about the new opportunities in our friendly countries, but I can focus on transportation corridors. We have railroads and auto roads, and we also have multimodal, where there is also shipment by sea. And usually we discuss the corridor north-south. At the moment, it is thought to be an alternative route as opposed to other transportation corridors. And the transportation corridor north-south at the moment grows like 200% per year, but it is not enough because our infrastructure is underdeveloped. And if we have a look at Iran, our neighbor and partner, Iran on its territory develops river facilities, sea facilities, channels, the so-called the Iranian Canal. And not many people know about that in Russia, but you can actually transport goods through Iran via canals. And our recent negotiations demonstrate that even land transportation on north-south corridor has been developed even further. For example, the crossing over Caucasus, going through Lars block point, and very often you cannot openly discuss that, but nevertheless there are 10 transportation corridors going through the territory of the Russian Federation, 10 major corridors, and we also have to pay attention to others as well. You should pay attention to the northern path along the northern Arctic shore, and you can think of the corridor to western China, and you should also have a look at the designed corridors, the corridors which are now under design. Right now we've been creating a corridor from China to the Far East in the region of Hassan, in Primorye region of the Russian Federation. So at the moment we've got so many opportunities due to different changes in different spheres of our life. We have many more opportunities in comparison with tightly regulated economy used to have. For example, trans-border payments. For example, if you are a client of a large bank, yes, you do have problems, but if you are not afraid of diversifying your business and you open up several banking accounts in small banks, and if your transactions are not huge, if it's not $1 billion, you can make a lot of smaller transactions, and your life is getting better and better. And it's much easier to work with smaller and more flexible financial institutions rather than with huge banks. And I mean not only banks, I also mean such procedures as payment agents and the long forgotten, but still there is this humanitarian transportation of goods or transportation of humanitarian aid. So if you have very good lawyers who can conduct a long litigation and negotiation with the United Nations, you can receive an opportunity to ship goods from any country of the European Union, including the red codes, if you can include them into humanitarian aid category. The friendliest country for us now is the countries of our customs union, Kazakhstan and Belarus.
В настоящий момент
At the moment, Belarus
узаконила
made it a law to use cryptocurrency. So you don't have to go to the State Duma or participate in some public negotiations and discussions and debates and make suggestions to our central bank about the necessity to legalize cryptocurrency. No, you can just go to Belarus and conduct all your transactions in cryptocurrency. Mining is also allowed over there. If you are interested in that, you can come up to me and I will share this information about it with you. The same can be said about China. China is present in Belarus. They built a huge Chinese-Belarusian industrial park. There are 16 residents over there, but the number of residents will increase dramatically. And what is going to happen? Very often people say that China is not interested in Russia because our market is too small. We can say the same about products, but
Китаю нужно продовольствие.
China does need food.
У продовольственных программ
And when we talk about food programs,
Российская Федерация
both Belarus and Russia and Kazakhstan are of huge interest to China. China needs us. So please pay attention to such niches which can be linked with the Chinese
полностью абсолютно
food industry, and you will be quite prosperous. Besides, China is interested in our coal, strange as it may sound. And if we come back to logistics, the hugest problem right now is that
под уголь. И
most of our transportation park, and including containers,
вагоны. Да?
all of them are used for coal transportation.
При этом, конечно,
And,
контейнерные перевозки,
of course, the containers
потому что мы перевозим
are quite problematic because we transport a lot of air
целую
in them. They are just transported empty. So the Russian railroads initiated the program how to rearrange goods within containers. So be prepared. There will be a lot of new rules.
и
The container transportation will be more expensive.
Можно я еще прям два слова?
Can I also add a couple of words?
Тоже считаю себя, можно сказать, обывателем.
I'm a layperson over here, so because I do not work with the global transportation market, so for lay people we can explain it. Right now, for example, we have 200,000 containers, and the global leader has 7 million of them. Now you can understand the scale, how many containers we have and how many containers other suppliers have. And of course, it influences
Понимать, что
the prices, and we can produce more containers, yes, but we don't have ships enough, and it's not a matter of one day, and that's kind of a
сейчас у нас перспектива.
chain reaction. And if I remember correctly, we have 5.5
Получает.
million containers we can install on new ships, and we have the growth of production. But right now, at the moment, the situation is pretty difficult. And that is why there will be new configuration of packing goods within a container.
Другой вопрос, что пропускная способность дорог.
Besides, the capacity of our railroads, the throughput of our railroads is limited. It's 21 ton per one container. You cannot exceed that limit. And yes, there are 24, 25 ton containers, but they are put on different carriages and they are kind of differently. And we can speak about the throughput and the capacity and the wayload of highways, where you cannot have a truck with the heavier container. But we have hopes that the Russian Federation can get back to our old project, which was called the
любой дороге должна быть
infrastructure of heavy containers for Russian roads, when you can have one line on a highway
дорогу приземлиться.
strengthened by specific things, and you can actually make it as a takeoff and a landing strip for heavy planes.
Так вступили в дискуссию.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed your discussion and even felt a bit incompetent when you started to discuss the amounts of loads and, of course, to talk about the core system. Thank you very much.
Действительно крайне
I believe that actually it is essential for the state, as Andrei Evgenievich said, the state to hear the
формально,
businesses and also implemented those projects and of course launched them to see the progress, to see the effect, even for example talking about the current
понимаем, что вот
quite insignificant problem. Even though we have some changes, the customers' ability is quite low right now. For example, only 2,000 cars, of course, is not enough.
сильно за ваше выступление.
Thank you very much, Natalia Vasilyevna. Dear colleagues, now we move from
Говорили про таможню.
general aspects, microeconomics, logistics, customers, services.
Бизнес,
We need to notify that Russian business now
новые
look forward to the new markets.
являются, безусловно,
The basis of them, as Natalia Vasilyevna mentioned,
СНГ,
the former CIS countries,
Америка, Ближний
Latin America,
Восток, Юго-Восток,
Middle East, Africa, and
во внимании российского
Eastern Asia. They are of a great interest to our country. Today we also conducted a session
итальянскую, и я достаточно тоже
of Russia and Italy. I actively
внимательными стран западных
interact with the entrepreneurs from the Western Europe.
не утратилось.
I could say that their vigor to conduct business
Новые, чтобы
is remaining still. The only need what we have right now is to repair, to restore the flow. Now business has more opportunities, and now I'd like to look
поскольку
at the
большой
Southeastern Asia, because they have quite young generation with active
предлагаю поговорить этот вопрос
customers ability. Now I'd like to talk to
председатель
Synok Anastasia, the chairperson
Анастасия. Вот давайте
of the committee,
посмотрим.
chairperson of the Vietnam Relations Committee. So I think that we could start with this example. What are the perspectives of Russian market right now? What about Vietnam's attitude towards Russia, and which
Может быть, кейс
successful practices and cases do we have nowadays? Thank you very much.
В общих чертах
I'd like
о Вьетнаме,
to give you a general vision of Vietnam, not only as a country, but also as the gates to the Southwestern Asia, and what perspectives do we have in the companionship with this country.
для презентации.
Can I use the clicker, please? The remote controller.
пожалуйста.
Please put on the presentation.
Нет, презентация.
Презентацию
No, we have the presentation. We have sent it to you.
на сайте.
Dear colleagues,
Сейчас такая небольшая,
I believe it would be easier
немножко
to
нашу
change our section a bit, to listen to the questions related to
Востоком.
the Middle East, and then come back to the Southeastern Asia.
Естественно, коллеги, давайте тогда сейчас,
So, dear colleagues,
пока там решают,
I think nowadays when we try to mend Oh, everything is working.
презентация.
So we have the presentation right now.
Тогда, Анастасия, еще раз.
Anastasia, once again, I'd like to give you the floor. Once again, good afternoon. Thank you.
Уважаемые коллеги, да,
Dear colleagues,
рассказать о
I'd like to present you the perspectives of partnership of Russian entrepreneurs with Vietnam in the current state. Of course, everyone knows that Russia and Vietnam have long experience of partnership, and historically we were both friendly countries to each other. Still, Vietnam is open and loyal to Russia
готов
and is ready to conduct partnership.
несколько слов именно кратких
I'd like to speak about the country. Nowadays, Vietnam is the country with one of the rapidly growing economies in the world. And for several years, they show
6%.
a great increase in economics, on average 6% annually. This rapid changing
Очень быстро
times, the politics of Vietnam
было все
has changed
поступающие возможности, так сказать,
quite fast and used all the upcoming opportunities for the development of their country.
стал пятой экономикой
Now, Vietnam is the fifth economics
больших
in Asia,
традиционных экономик, как Сингапур,
among traditional economies like Singapore, Indonesia, and others, and also the 12th economics of just Asia. For several years already, they
экономик Азии и
tried to become the leader, the tiger of economics in Asia. They used all the opportunities they receive.
коротко о том, какие
In short, which
заключается
what are the investment attractiveness
для
what-
потенциального рынка.
for potential market and also
Во-первых, это
the development of partnership. First of all, political stability. Vietnam follows its goals
своей страны
for the development of the country and preservation of the balance
быстро меняющимися
in the rapidly changing forces in the world.
правительство Вьетнама
For this reason, the government of Vietnam actively implements the investment politics for and creates the comfortable conditions for attraction of
экономические зоны, которые
external fundings
также хочется
funds.
что
I also would like to notify that the population of Vietnam,
рабочая часть достаточно
the working
30-35 лет,
generation, the average
что Вьетнам
age 30-35
таким торговым партнером,
could become a strategic partner
который заключил
because it's the country
двусторонние
which has 15 bilateral and multilateral agreements with main economic unions in the world that I want to touch upon a bit later.
внимание, что
We also need to notify that the population of Vietnam reaches
и это постоянно
100 million people. It's a rapidly growing market with
запросы.
growing customers' needs and infrastructure.
Вьетнам является
That is why Vietnam is a key country in Asia.
с населением
The gates with the population
100 миллионов человек.
of about 700 million people. It is also the country with good geographical location,
Морские порты,
where they have the seaports, railroads,
торговые взаимоотношения.
and of course the trade interaction is quite comfortable.
Показаны индустриальные
Here on the slide you can see the industrial parks and economic zones of Vietnam.
Вьетнама.
Nowadays, the state of Vietnam
Во Вьетнаме их
is involved into the development of this territory. They are also divided into several directions. For example, economic zones for production or for export potential. Also, the parks for development of high technologies, industrial parks.
момент действует
Now,
уже более
there are more than 300 industrial parks put into operation, and their load
порядка
covers up only 60-70%.
развивается
So the government is involved into attractiveness of for investment of these territories. So what this economic zone can give?
Деятельность
They could conduct activities with high effectiveness, qualified
достаточно недорогая рабочая
and
сила предоставляет
not that expensive workforce
на этих территориях,
on these territories. And of course,
которые не могут не
bonuses in taxation,
на данный
which could attract new partners for these territories.
говорила. Вьетнам
As I mentioned before, Vietnam is a country
с 15 действующими
with 15 acting international agreements on preferential trade.
указаны на слайде.
You can see them on the slide.
Вьетнам также действует
Russia and Vietnam has the agreement on the free trade too, within the framework of
если говорить о контуре,
Vietnam Agreement EIS.
то
We're
также
talking about the relationships between
товара
Vietnam and Russia. More than 95%
таможенными
of different goods are not under taxation.
между Россией и Вьетнамом
About the structure of import and export between Russia and Vietnam,
категории из России во Вьетнам
the key export
энергоносители,
categories are
газ,
power, energy,
удобрения
bearers,
во Вьетнаме
fertilizers,
растет и
organic fertilizers, because there is a lack in Vietnam.
питание, продукты
So forestry or logging products, agriculture products, sea products, you can see them on the slide, meat,
категорию спрос на фармацевтические
also for
лекарства,
pharmacy products, different types of
активная работа
medications.
сертификации
Now they are actively
для того, чтобы
simplify the customers' service for medications.
во Вьетнаме
And one of the new directions, which are highly developed right now and are of a great need, is the development of IT technologies and products, because Vietnam moves towards digitalization and they need specialists in cyber safety,
образование,
education,
если возможно, хотите
smart city systems. So it's a separate direction of a great need. As for import from Vietnam to Russia, traditionally we have here food products,
морепродукты,
fabrics,
и
seafood, makeup,
прошлого года
and since the middle
активная
of
гонка
2023, they
полупроводников.
are involved into
Это тоже уже не секрет.
an active development of
Кажется, что Вьетнам
semiconductors.
в Азии крупнейший
It is required that it would be the biggest
одним из направлений по
supplier of them in Asia. We also would like to notify a separate direction which is highly developed in Vietnam. And if we are talking about entering the Vietnamese market, we need to take into account the growth of the e-commerce
социальных сейчас
and marketplace trade.
крупнейший
Right now, it's the biggest foundation, the biggest niche for trade.
с оборотом 20 миллиардов
2023, we have finished with the overturn for
торговли на маркетплейсах достигнет уже 60 миллиардов долларов.
the biggest amount, and up to in 2030, it is considered to reach $60 billion.
Визитов в месяц. Большая ниша, которой
It's quite a big niche, what we need to take into consideration.
очень важно
It is essential to talk about the payment systems and the current situation.
российский вьетнамский бизнес
Russia-Vietnamese business
совместно
could be saved by the Russian-Vietnamese bank. It's a subsidiary of our VTB bank and also Vietnamese State Bank.
в начале марта была рабочая встреча,
At the beginning of May, we had a working meeting with the authorities,
между Россией и Вьетнамом
and they assured us that
будут проходить
all the payments
единственное
would
валютах.
suffer no casualties, of course, only in the national currency. We also asked that we have the transit payments needed, because right now it's quite widespread to face limitations and sanctions around the countries. Here, the authorities stated that they're not ready to be the transit foundation, but they are ready to assist in opening of their own foundations there. As for transportation, we have marine transportation, like overseas transportation, air and trains also. Between the main ports in Vietnam to Vladivostok, the transit time from 9 to 11 days. And from Vladivostok, it is possible to deliver goods by train within 10 days. We also have a railroad via China up to the central region of Russia. Here the transit reaches 25-30 days, but still they have no complications and casualties. We also would like to discuss the opening of the companies in Vietnam. If you'd like to be involved into relocation, many people say that Vietnam is a good bridge for working with your partners, with which Russia cannot conduct partnership. As for the taxation, the taxation on the income is estimated as 20%. The director also should be the resident, and they need to have fines for supporting the company for a year, at least a year. If you need to get the residency, you need to understand that everything that was produced in this company would have the status of made in Vietnam. That's how they could open the new ways to work with the partners where we have limitations for partnership. Also, we would like to talk about business missions conducted in Vietnam and which are highly supported, because it is the country which is open for personal meetings, eye-to-eye communication, understanding who is your partner. That's why, of course, they conduct different types of exhibitions, both wide range, wide sort. And we also conduct the business missions of the Russian entrepreneurs to Vietnam and vice versa. Accordingly, it is an essential step for better cooperation between the countries. I think that's it. Thank you for your attention, and I would be glad to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Anastasia, I would like to add that in practice I can see quite a lot of involvement of Vietnamese business in Russia. We conduct, for example, business breakfasts with Vietnam, and they attract a lot of entrepreneurs both from Vietnam and from Russia. Yes, it is a very promising direction of work. And Anastasia is an expert in Vietnam. She speaks Vietnamese, and she knows a lot of people in Vietnam in different regulatory authorities. So if you are interested in working with Vietnam, Anastasia will be able to help you out. We are really pressed for time, dear colleagues, and I would like to give the floor to our last speaker. And we have covered the southeastern Asia, it's a very promising market as well. But business also looks at the Middle East and the Gulf countries. And I would like to pass the floor to Christina Tantur. She's the head of the Association of Exporters and Importers, and she is an expert in developing your business in Arab Emirates and the Middle East. So, Christina, a question to you, maybe not a standard question, but first business rushed to the Emirates, and right now I think there is some slowing down because people faced the harsh realities and they thought everything would have been much easier. Well, I can give you some history. I've been working in Emirates from 2011 and up until 2020. I was seen as a village idiot because I was the girl who tries to build business in the Middle East. And when in Russia, I described my experience over there, and they asked me, do you wear burqa over there? Or do you walk over there with a man? And the man has to say everything. And that continued up until 2020. And the pandemics forced us to make the very first step. Expo 2020 was very conducive for that, and the Russian business came to the Arab countries and understood women do not have to wear burqas. And Arab Emirates, it's not only about sand and shopping. There are some issues for business. And then in the year of 2022, I stopped being a village idiot. I became in huge demand, and people started asking me to open up enterprises over there. And people believe that there is no taxation over there, no laws. Everybody, well, not everybody, but all the world and his wife rushed in, and they faced difficulties over there, and they failed just because they had come with the initial idea that everything is so easy. Emirates is a brilliant example of the marketing of the country. We should follow this example. They are brilliant about positioning their country, about promoting their image. Nobody in the world can do anything of the sort. There is marketing of the Emirates and Dubai, and there is this harsh reality. As a transportation hub, as a trade hub, as the country #1 in Middle East and country #1 in many indices in the world, yes, it is true, but there are nuances, of course, and of course some of the nuances are oriental. Yes, their hub is one of the largest in the world, and their company is one of the largest among those which plan transportation and has their own ports all over the world and opened up their own transportation hub in Russia. And I do hope that this direction of logistics from Russia to Emirates will become much more direct and open and transparent due to DP World Hub. But let's look at our relations. First, from 2022, every year our turnover increases twofold. Last year it was 9 billion rubles. When I started working with the Emirates, it was less than $1 million. And right now it's $9 billion. And here are some goods which already participate in our relations, in our trade turnover. This year it added construction materials, and hooray, our pharmaceuticals, pharma company, was certified to trade over there, and the pharmaceutical goods will appear in the Middle East. What difficulties Russian trade encounters over there, trade business? The first thing is that we have very different systems of certification. They are not unified. They are not directly compatible. So every Russian product entering this market has to be certified. And that's at best. Certificate of correspondence and, for example, sweets. Okay, you have to have an additional certificate for anything containing sugar. You have to have separate certification of electronics, electric goods. Even if you have European certification, well, it will make your life a bit easier, but not very much because their temperatures are different. And as for meat program, that's halal certification, and you have to certify your production line. The second barrier is the mentality. At the moment, there are two strategies, clear and understandable strategies for the Russian business. First strategy, Emirates as a market. Not the most interesting because they have 9.5 million people.
For a German company, it's quite a small market with its specifics because Emirates is not just an Arabic country at the nationality. Most of them, people from India and Pakistan, with their model of consumption. But for some of the moments and some of the goods and some of the services, they could be that market, but they have their own strategy of work. It's the introduction into the culture and also plunging into the peculiarities of the country. It's not those marketing we got used to. It's certification. It's local personnel, strictly because you're relocated. People cannot do anything on the local market. And it's all about the selling market. And of course, the rest GCC countries too. For example, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and so on. They're different, but the general notions are the same. The second is the international cost of sales. If you are saying that you are not entering this market, we don't change the marketing. We just use Emirates as our own trade house for our partners around the world, for conservation of the previous partnerships that we had and which were broken due to the situation of 2022, or maybe the search for a new one, but not in the Arabic market. So these countries who follow this strategy and who follows it still, like, let's open something right now and then we'll see. These companies close everything and come back because two different strategies need two different ways, two different registrations of the company. The third mistake of the Russian business is here we need to get rid of most of consultants because once again, a sustainable myth that nobody checks anything there and you can do anything what you want. Of course, there are no taxation. No, not now. They finished this type of policy in 2018. But up to 2023, it was a bit easier than now. Now you need to work in the Emirates the same way as you work in Russia. You have strict and firm compliance. You need to understand all the operations, why and what. For every coin and every activity, you need to have a document. You need to show all your reports, pay the taxes, and follow the requirements of the Emirates policy. And part of Russian businesses were not ready for it. They wanted simply conduct everything and all the and not to meet all the requirements. And then they saw compliance, closing of the accounts, taxes and fees, because no specialist, no expertise, and where to take it. Once again, when you enter any market, you need to build up the right strategy. Why, what, and what is the way. As for taxation, 9% income tax. If you build up via Emirates and international selling department, you could save up and you could have the privilege of lesser payment.
А вот дальше для тех, кто хочет выйти на рынок Ближнего Востока.
Then further, for those who want to become a partner of the Middle East, I would tell you one story. So I have two stories connected with Emirates, one with handkerchief and about the 12 TV sets.
Восток
The Middle East
регион, который
is the region which is very subtle about ethics
бизнес,
and about conducting business.
Эмираты, по сути,
Emirates is
это страна, где
a modern country,
в костюмах
not that religious, everyone wears suits.
есть нюансы.
But there are some peculiarities,
Уважаете культуру,
and if you respect the culture of this country, you will have more privileges and more trust. If you want to work with Saudi Arabia, for instance, or Qatar, or Kuwait, or Bahrain, you must
специфику работы.
get deeper into the country's rules. In 2018, the story of handkerchief, we had an exhibition stand. It was connected with IT, computing. I was the head of one of the IT companies in Middle East, and my partner phoned me. He told me that he is going with Saudi Arabia delegation, and I saw how they reached the stand. And I took the handkerchief
В кресле лежит
that was
хиджаб.
not far from me there on the armchair, and I put it on my head. After our conversation, I became one of the lecturers in cyber safety in the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Saudi Arabia, and I was the only one woman who did that.
Я подписала эту сделку.
I signed this agreement.
Спросила,
After a while, when I asked my client, country agent, how could I reach this?
Сауди, у тебя не получится.
Everyone talked about the way that I would have nothing with Saudi Arabia because I'm a woman. They said that I was the first woman who showed the respect to the culture, and you did it that way easy, that they understood that they could trust me. And the trust in the Middle East is a key factor to start your business. That is why
Работать на Ближнем Востоке. Первое, вы
if you want to work with the Middle East, you need to study the culture. We shouldn't bring your rules to this country. You need to follow the rules directly, and then you will reach the success, and then you will grow your business there. And the Middle East is a very interesting region from position of business. If Saudi Arabia, together with Emirates, is more than 30, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, Pakistan, then we cover up the southeastern Asia because it's all money. Malaysia, it's also partially Saudi Arabia.
на Ближний Восток.
Africa, money of Middle East region. So study the culture.
А можно следующий?
Can I show the next slide, please?
Эти традиции
Study the traditions.
в Эмиратах.
There are no questions to women in Emirates.
И почему?
That is why
И, кстати,
it works, especially in some
в направлениях,
directions,
если руководитель
business directions. It is even better if you have a woman boss there. It would be easier for her to conduct talks.
и нет санкций.
And there are no limitations, no sanctions. Of course, there are problems with payments, but as everywhere.
Трансляции.
And of course, we could talk. It's without the After the
Налоги.
sessions, I could answer some of the questions if you want. But the attitude towards Russian goods and Russian companies is very good too.
Показывает,
And those companies who have already opened there, they have no questions and no pretensions to our bosses, to our companies and our goods. The only thing is patience. patience is key of your success. Never be in a hurry and never make your partners hurry. Respect their culture. I always open to answer your questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Distinguished colleagues, your applause. It was very interesting to listen about the respect. Actually, really, right now, we work on the markets where you need patience. For example, Turkey, China, 20 cups of tea should be drunk before you'll have the talks. The Emirates are the same. Of course, they have their peculiarities. You need to drink a lot of tea, to wait a lot, to get used to the flow of life there. And during one of the speeches in Moscow, I told that we are not ready to wait. We're impatient and very dynamic. And our head of the Committee on Indonesia told me that I need to learn how to wait when we are entering other markets. I'd like to ask for applause to our speakers once again. I think that now we are in such state, as Andrei Evgenievich told before, we have a window of opportunities, and only we are those people who could realize it. Only we could implement everything. I wish you success in your deeds and your business. I have only one question. You see, I will give you my business card, and we would send you all the presentations. We already finished our session. Once again, thank you very much for your attention. Have a nice day. Goodbye.